I'm Jimmy Johnson, and welcome to the Stay in the Course podcast. I'm an award-winning journalist, motivational speaker, spiritual leader, blogger, and now a podcaster. In this podcast, my hope is to introduce you to some of the most influential thought leaders around the globe, all here to inspire, uplift, and motivate you to fulfill your purpose and make a difference on this earth. You're called to stay the course.
This episode is sponsored by Nave Official Clothing, a brand aimed at paying it forward and inspiring others.
From the corner chair in his South Florida barbershop, today's guest is redefining what it means to be a barber. His growing following of 85,000 plus on Instagram not only gets snaps of tapers and fades, but in between cuts, it's not uncommon for him to share motivational messages he believes can cure a generation. The single Black father of one is the epitome of the haves and the have-nots. While he has now attained some success like opening up his own barbershop, he isn't removed from his past. In fact, he uses it to fuel and dominate in his craft. And his message continues to captivate audiences far beyond the four walls of his shop. Let's welcome Qure Sturkey to the Stay in the Course podcast.
How's it going, man? How's it going? Appreciate you opening up this platform for me and giving me this opportunity to kind of share my story and reach as many people as possible. You know, I definitely do appreciate it. You taking the time out your day to be here and giving me this opportunity again.
What's so awesome about you being one of the first interviews of the show is the fact that you're one of the few people who actually encouraged me on this journey. I remember sitting in your barbershop, in your chair, and you were saying, "What are you waiting for? Go for it." And so for that, I appreciate you not only just pouring into me, but also encouraging me to start this show and also just really having you on a guest because you have a wealth of knowledge that I believe goes beyond the barbershop and into the world. And I think that you can just influence so many people with your platform. So just thanks for pushing me and just really, I'm honored to have you on the show. Now, it didn't really take me very long to figure out that the reason why I didn't start the podcast in the beginning was it was due to fear. And I believe that's what prevents a lot of people from really going after those dreams and aspirations in their lives, pushing them to, reach their full potential. So I think that's just a part of the success of you as a barber. So when I think about what I really wanted to have you on this podcast was because I know you had some struggles, you had some triumphs, and now you're at the level now where you're pouring into other people. So tell me what it means to you, for one, to cure a generation, because I know that's the name of your barbershop. What was the reason behind it?
Well, for one, when I signed my lease for my barbershop, I didn't even have a name. I had no idea. I know for a fact I didn't want to name it like Qure's Barbershop or Bonez, Cuts by Bonez. I wanted to have something that would translate outside of the barber industry and be able to kind of be like a mission statement in itself. So when I came up with the name Qure, it was basically because the season that I was at in my life, I was going through a curing process and I was being put in uncomfortable situations and things and trials was coming up against me, and I was kind of forced to grow and accept that this was all a part of the process. So for me, I gave it that name because it's like the term is used as with a blacksmith when they get a raw piece of iron, they beat it, they cool it, they put it on fire and they shine it and polish it in order for it to become that perfected form of the idea that they had in their mind. But in order for them to get to that point, there has to be a process of curing it in order to get there. And I apply that to people in real life. In order for us to become our cured versions of who we are, there's a process that needs to take place in a sense of discomfort that has to go on in order for you to be and get to that level of your cured version of yourself.
That's good, man. That's good. And just so I'm being transparent, Qure is actually my barber, so it's not like I don't know who this guy is. This isn't my first time having a conversation with him. The dude is super intellectual. And I've had several guys who cut my hair in the past, and none of them talk like this guy. None of them put in wisdom and pours into me like he does, and just so many of the other people that, sits in his chair. But, I follow you obviously on social media, and obviously I go to your barbershop to get my hair cut every other week or so. On April 9th, you may not even remember this, but you shared this. It says, there's a Nipsey Hussle in your own city that you don't even support. Now, before you even really address what you posted or shared, because I don't know if that's your exact words or not, For those of you who may not know who Nipsey Hussle was, because I don't want to assume, because to be honest, a few months ago, I didn't even know who Nipsey Hussle was because I don't listen to his music. I'm not from the West Coast. I'm not really familiar with, Nipsey Hussle. But I had a friend, her name's Leah Uku. She's a reporter in Los Angeles, and she did this extensive feature story about Nipsey Hussle, about his life as a rapper, businessman, philanthropist. And she talked about how he was giving back to his community, bought this strip mall, and had this clothing store, barbershop, and was just doing all these different things. But unfortunately, he was shot and killed right outside of the shopping center that he purchased and in the community he lived. So for you, I know that probably hit home for you because you feel like you're someone in this community who wants to give back. And once you reach a certain status in your community, there's so much hate, there's so much negativity, when Nipsey Hussle was just actually trying to bring his community together.
For me, like it hit home a lot, just because I was a fan of his music, and it doesn't help that people call me to say I look like him all the time, But the thing that bothered me the most was like, it kind of, for a second, I almost thought about retracting from the mission that I had at hand to help my community, because it's like, you make yourself available, you're transparent with people, and then there's people that hate. But the thing that kind of deterred me from being like that was that there's also people that support. There's also people that love and genuinely want to see you be successful. And, it messed me up. Like when I found out about it, I ended up going to my son's mother's house, picking up my son out the bed and just hugging him, crying, because all I could think about was like what life would be like for my son if something like that, was to happen to me. So it definitely messed me up. But at the same time, it inspired me to go like even harder. Like it definitely had an effect on like the goals that I had set in place. I felt like looking at what he did, my goals weren't big enough. Like Les Brown says, it's like a big problem with people is that they don't aim too high and miss, they aim too low and hit. And I felt like, I was aiming too low, and I felt like I should reapply myself and just go back to the drawing board and just make my goals even bigger, and, and understand that by the outside world, they may think that it's not possible. I don't have a college degree, didn't have a lot of education and finance and stuff like that, but I'm a hard worker. You know what I'm saying? So it made me kind of go back and say, I can have this, and I can do for my community the same way that he did. Whether or not he died the way that he died, his mark was left. And that's what I've always like kind of hung my hat on, is like, if at any point in time, if, God sees it fit for it's time for me to go, what legacy did I leave behind? What does my son think about me? What do people say when I leave the room? Like, I want to be remembered I don't want to be remembered for somebody who just did a good fade. I wanted my reach to be a lot larger than that. So his death, it did hurt me, but it definitely did inspire and light a fire in me to go like even harder.
I'm pretty sure the death of Nipsey Hussle was a topic of conversation in barbershops all across the country.
We still talk about it.
Yeah. So what was it like just, going back into the barbershop the next day, having those conversations with, those people that come in? What were they saying?
It was hurt, and it was just confusion, and like people say like what happened when, like how the world was when Tupac died. It was like, it's bad, but it was nowhere near as like drastic as this was with Nipsey dying. So people coming into the shop were legitimately were messed up about it. And we could tell like the whole vibe of the shop was just crazy. We played Nipsey like half the whole day, and everybody just kind of like reflecting on it, and just, it made you like really sit and think about like, are you doing everything in your power to be the best version of yourself?
Yeah, that's good, man. I hear you say and post this all the time, and I actually was just scrolling through your Instagram yesterday because I was just thinking about like conversations, or really just things you shared, or videos, because occasionally you do some videos where you just speak on stuff that you just feel like will motivate or inspire someone. And you said, I commonly hear you say, change, not fame. Yeah. Change, not fame. We live in a generation where, everyone thrives off of social acceptance. If it's not fame, what's your motivation to inspire?
My motivation to inspire is that I feel that everybody is capable of being better than what they're holding themselves to be. I feel like we kind of underachieve in a sense in where we're supposed to be and how we can help each other. you know? So for me, like the whole change, not fame thing is huge for me because I never envisioned like, I didn't get into a barbering to be like rich. Like I didn't promote myself on Instagram to be Instagram famous. I just did it because I understood that the more people that I get to follow me, the bigger platform that I have to inspire people and bring change. I never cared about the whole fame or the money of it because at the end of the day, none of that stuff matters because Instagram could be gone tomorrow. And then what do people say about you in your community? You know, what does your family think about you? What is the opinion of your friends and the close people to you? So change has always been the biggest thing to me. And understanding that when you have a platform, it's your responsibility to bring change.
And for the viewers who are listening, they don't know your story. Just give a little bit of background on where you came from, your upbringing, and really the journey within the last couple of years to get to where you are now. I know there were some, struggles. I remember, you telling me that you moved in back with your parents. You were sleeping on a twin bed. You took Uber for a year and a half. Yeah. You sold your car. I mean, you did all of these things to sacrifice to go after your dream. But we live in a society where we want this popcorn success story.
You want the microwave blessings.
Microwave, yeah. That's what I really want to say.
The microwave blessings, Nobody wants to put it in the crock pot and let it sit and smoke and simmer for a little bit. But my story was I moved to Florida when I was like 9 years old. And we literally moved to Florida. Me, my mother, my father, we moved to Florida just because my dad was in his prayer. And he said that God told him that Florida was going to be the land of milk and honey for him and his family. Mind you, my dad has a 9th grade education. My mom just got a decent job at Bell South back in the day. That's like the AT&T now, And my dad was the soup for the projects that we live in so that way we can get a discount on our rent. We had a Dodge Stratus. That's the only thing my parents owned. So when my mom was like, what do you mean we're moving to Florida? He said, because God told me Florida's going to be the land of milk and honey for me and my family. And that's why we moved to Florida. We moved out here, and for a few, we lived in a Howard Johnson hotel over there in West Palm Beach. We ended up moving in with my aunt in her 1-bedroom apartment, and we slept in her living room on a blow-up mattress for a while. My dad ended up starting to cut hair, this and the third. We dealt with stuff where, my parents, was struggling, and I had to go live in Virginia with my grandparents because like my parents were homeless or whatnot. So, like growing up, I always kind of had a lack of sense of security and self-acceptance. I was very insecure growing up as a child. High school sucked for me, like for lack of better words, it was horrible. Like I was getting told every 2 weeks my senior year by my dean to drop out of high school and go do an alternative school because it was impossible for me to graduate. But in that time period, I learned how strong I was mentally because that was the first time in my life that I actually applied myself to something and said I was going to do it, and it worked. So get out of there. Try to do what society tells you to do, go to college. Didn't work out for me. I've learned very young, if I'm not passionate about something, it's impossible for me to dedicate myself 100% to it. So I dropped out. My father ended up teaching me how to cut hair. And in that time frame of me learning how to cut hair, I was going through really bad depression, like suicidal, like really bad. A conversation with my mother actually saved my life.
More of the Staying the Course podcast after this. Nave Official isn't just a brand where you shop and receive your order. With each purchase, you can send a signature Nave item with a customized message on the label to the person of your choice. It's Nave's way of paying it forward and inspiring others. Shop Nave's new spring selection of clothing at naveofficial.com. BAM Communications, lasting connections through effective branding and marketing. At BAM, problems are opportunities and challenges are springboards for new ideas. Our relentless work ethic and sincere approach helps you or your business stand out. For more information, visit bamcommunications.com.
I remember telling her I felt like I was a loser and that all the sacrifices that her and my father made for us to have a better life, I'm wasted now because I dropped out of school. I can't keep a job and I cut hair. And I felt like, cutting hair wasn't a real job. And my mother said to me that you're not a loser. I didn't raise a loser. I raised a great man. She said, when people told me to get an abortion because I got pregnant by a black man and black men are only good for getting women pregnant and leaving them, God told me that you was going to be great and you was going to have a heart for the people. She said, so the moment that you were born, I gave you back to God because you was my sense of love and acceptance that I needed that I wasn't getting from my family. Like my grandfather, like slapped my mom in the face, like disowned her, kicked her out the house. Like she got disfellowship from her church that she went to. Friends stopped speaking to her all because she told me that I was going to be this person in this world.
Let's go back to where you were talking about your upbringing, the depression, the suicidal. Go there.
The suicidal stage was it just was accumulation of me growing up as a child, like my family, like Trinidadian and Black, and I told you about the turmoil between my mother being pregnant by a Black man. I felt like I was too dark to be on the Trinidadian side, and I almost felt like I was too light skinned to fit in with my Black side. So I never felt like I fit in at any point in time in my life. So growing up, I always had like that emptiness, So when that depression was kicking in, it was like I feel like I already felt like I didn't have any value because I didn't feel that acceptance and love from both sides of the family. But now I don't have that self-love for myself. I didn't appreciate what my parents had did for me, and I felt like life was going in no direction. So barbering was the one thing that I had that I can honestly say saved my life. It gave me purpose. It was something I was able to manifest passion from and really dedicate myself to it when I was feeling like I was lost. But that conversation with my mother is what 100% was what saved my life, because I dealt with depression. I would just go in the room and go to sleep and assume that when I wake up that those problems will be gone. But that conversation definitely with my mom and her telling me what she told God when she found out she was pregnant is 100% what saved my life.
That's good, man. We all have, stories of some point in our life where, we, experience some type of tragedy, and that ultimately, I believe, leads to triumph, and it allows us to use those stories to impact someone else's life. When did you get to a place where you said, I'm going to give it all up and pursue the goal or vision you had in mind? Because you sold your car, man. You just let everything go. How did you get to that state of mind, that mind frame?
So that was me and my me and my son's mother split up, and I moved back home with my dad. And that was when depression hit again. Because mind you, I would wake my son up, take him to school. I'm dressing him. I'm giving him a bath. I'm putting him to sleep. And then to go from having that every day to having it 2 times a week, it messed me up. Like that, I felt like a part of me was gone. I remember laying in my bed, in a twin size bed. Mind you, I'm 6'2", so I'm laying in this twin size bed, and I'm watching an episode of Shark Tank. And there's a farmer on there, and he's pitching this invention called a tree teepee. And he's so humble. Just you could tell he had a really good upbringing. His parents did a great job on him. He ends up getting accepted. Like one of the sharks ends up taking the deal with him. And while he's walking away, one of the sharks says to him, "Hey, tell your father he should be proud. He raised a great man." And the guy turns back around and said, "My father died 12 years ago," and broke down, started crying. He's like, "That man taught me everything that I know. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for my father." He taught me that nobody's going to give you nothing in life. Everything you want, you got to work for it. And I broke down, started crying, because the first thing I thought about was my father and the sacrifice that my dad made, and how he didn't have a lot of anything, but what he had, what God gave him for me, was just enough. So I called him crying. Now I actually I'm tripping. I got up, went to his room, hugged him, and broke down, started crying. But then when I got back in the bed, I sat and I thought, what will my son say about me if I pass away, about what legacy I left behind for him? And I never wanted a barbershop, Jamie, like ever. I never wanted a barbershop. My goal was to stack as much money as I can, take care of my son, and travel the world. That was my goal. And
so how you do all that without, a barbershop, man?
I make good money. You know what I'm saying? So I ended up texting my mentor. It was like midnight almost. I texted him. I said, Judd, my mentor is Judd Brown. I said, Judd, find me a barbershop. I want a shop. And he said to me, he was like, are you sure? Why the sudden change? And I explained to him about, what I want to do for my son. And I'm thinking like, all right, he's going to find a barbershop. It's going to take a couple months, the normal. He found it in 4 days. So that the safety that I thought I had got pulled up underneath me. And that's when the moment came of, all right, it's here now. What are you willing to do to get it?
That's good.
And when it came up, I had to mentally think to myself, what am I willing to give up to get what I ultimately want? And that's when the sacrifices started. I had to make that decision because it was never about owning a barbershop. The barbershop is just a part of what I want. What I really want is a legacy and a foundation for my son. Because I always say, I don't want to die and my family have to start a GoFundMe to make sure my child is taken care of. I refuse to let that happen. So the barbershop was not the end game. The barbershop was just the beginning of the foundation of what I'm trying to build for my family and for my seed.
So it wasn't the what, it's always the why.
100%. 100%. My son is my why. Because before my son was born, I was selfish. I was narcissistic. I cared about myself, and that was it. But the moment he was born, any parent knows, well, some parents know, the mass majority, when that child is born, it ain't about you no more. Your wants and stuff like that ultimately turn into, I want this, but what do I need? I'll be okay with what I need. I'll get my son or get my child what he wants. My son has always been my why. Always.
And so when you talk about the sacrifices you made to ultimately get the barbershop, but it didn't even really start with you wanting a barbershop. It just started with you really wanting a purpose. Yes. And the purpose is to make sure that your son has a legacy when it's all over for you.
Yes. That is the end game for me, is my son making sure my child is taken care of by any means necessary. Like the selling of the car, it hurt, but I understood this is a part of the process. Going through this process is when I got the name for the barbershop. Like getting rides to work from my mother, clients picking me up, dropping me home, taking Uber, walking in the rain to catch my Uber. Like this is a sacrifice I made. And in my room, that twin size mattress right behind me on the wall, I had pictures of my son, drawings that he did in his class, paintings, and I kept it in there so that when I walked in that room and that spirit, like, depression would try to hit me, I was instantly reminded of why I'm working this hard. I had to set something there to constantly bring me back down and remind you, like, all right, Corey. And I will constantly tell myself, bro, I'm walking in the rain, backpack on, from work, long day, and I'm telling myself it's just for a season, Corey. This isn't permanent. This is just a season. It's just a season. Embrace it and go through it. And one thing I never did, I never prayed and asked God to take me out of it. Never. Whenever I'm going through a storm, I never ask for a way out. I ask for understanding while I'm in the storm. And just if you can give me some type of peace while I'm here, that's all I need. Because I understand when moments of discomfort comes, it's confirmation, or it's a tell that growth is ultimately on the way. Change is ultimately on the way.
That's good, man. That's real good. Like, it's just kind of hard to follow up, But man, when you think about all that you went through and where you are now, I think the reward in the end is so great. And so, like, if you can speak to someone who's going to be listening to the Staying the Course podcast, that's what the name of the show is. Because, for me, my background being a news reporter and then stepping away from TV news, like, I always would tell people, stay the course, stay the course. And then I felt like when I transitioned into ministry, I was no longer staying the course. And I was kind of a hypocrite of what I've been telling people all along. But how would you encourage someone who right now may be going through some of those, pains that you went through, not even seeing an end in sight, not knowing, where they're going to get their, next success story from? What do you tell that person?
Well, for one, I feel like it's crazy. I was listening to a podcast this earlier with Dr. Oz and Tony Robbins, and he asked him like the same exact question. And Tony Robbins said, what I ultimately believe as well is the biggest thing that stops all of us, what you said at the beginning, is fear. That's ultimately the biggest thing that will hinder anybody from accomplishing their goals. Once you can understand that fear is whatever you make it. Like Les Brown says, fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing to be real. It's whatever you allow that thing to take shape in your life. No struggle. I don't believe that there's a problem without an equal or greater solution. But when you're in that time, it's hard to see like the way out. But the same thing that I told myself is what I always tell people, is that everything you go through in life is just a season, and every season comes to an end. what happens at the end of that season, it's going to be based on what you do whilst you're in it. You know what I'm saying? Like when I encounter a wall, I don't look at that wall as something insurmountable or something that it's impossible for me to get over. The revelation I got from a wall is society, we look at walls and we say, this thing is here, it's a bad thing. The thing here is to destroy you. It's here to stop you from who you're supposed to be, or stop you from your goal or from your passion or from your destiny. But for me, a wall is just confirmation that as good as I think I am in my current state in life right now, I'm supposed to be even better. Because once you overcome that wall, only thing that happens is you grow. You get more knowledge. You have more patience. You have more wisdom in it. So the biggest thing I would tell them is understand that there's going to be walls, but it's just confirmation that you're supposed to be greater than who you are right now, and embrace the process. Like I say on the back of my hoodies I have for the barbershop, it says embrace the fire.
That's a plug.
Yes, the fire is not, you can look at fire in two ways. It can either be used to fuel you and drive you, or you can let it consume you depending on how you position your mind and wrap your mind around what you're encountering in life.
Man, that's good. And what I admire most about you is just the way you give back to the community, and not just by cutting hair, but the way you pour into people, one. And I love you go and do all of these workshops, and you're not just going to hone your skills, but you're going to pour into someone else. But I believe we live in a society where majority wants something, but they're not willing to give anything in return. How do we change that mindset that, let me get what I can get. As long as I get what I can get, I'm good.
My favorite, bro, people ask me like, why you give so much stuff like that? I get my I get my drive from my father, but I get my heart for the people from my mother. And she ultimately gets it from her mother as well. My family just gives, they give. But the quote that I live by is, giving is the rent that we pay for the space that we take up on earth.
Tweet that.
It is our responsibility. When you're in a position to help, I feel like you should. Because at the end of the day, you giving and expecting something in return, whatever that person may be able to give you, whether it be monetary or not, if you die, you can't take it with you anyways. So the betterment of the people, us working together and giving back to each other, ultimately just helps the spirits. It makes life a lot easier for everyone. So I take joy in giving. When I'm able to give to somebody, that's for me, that's the best feeling in the world for me. And some people say that all the time, but I've been on the receiving end of it, where my family didn't have money to eat, and our church came through and filled up our refrigerator with groceries. Our car got repoed, and somebody from the church let my father borrow their car to get to work. So I've been on that other end where we didn't have, and someone gave to us without the expectation of getting anything in return. So I guess that seed was planted in me at a young age to be that way. I've always, I see a therapist from time to time, and she tells me that I have problems with codependency. I feel like it's my responsibility to take care of everybody that's around me. And I feel at times I get taken advantage of 100%, but my mindset has always been, since I was 16 years old, when I got my first job, and I would begin to give, and people would ask me, the way I made peace with myself was, God sees it, and I know He'll take care of me. And I've never been wrong. I've never been in a position to where I gave and God didn't come through for me in some way, shape, or form to make sure I had more than what I ultimately gave away.
That's good, man. I love your, spirit of giving, because it only comes back to you. It's only a seed sown. Man. So, hey, this part of the podcast is where we do rapid fire questions, right? So I have 5 questions for you. You just answer with the first thing that comes to your head. So if you could have a sit down with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Malcolm X.
Who's the actor you would have play as yourself in a movie about your life?
Will Smith.
If you weren't in this industry, what would you be doing?
Motivational speaking.
Marvel or DC Comics?
Marvel.
Your go-to television show? Dun, dun, dun.
Game of Thrones.
How can people follow you and just stay, in tune with what you're doing?
Well, you could follow me on Instagram. That's really like my only social media platform, is at Bonez, Bonez, D as in dog, A as in apple, GOAT, GOAT, Bonez the GOAT on Instagram.
And I appreciate you for stopping by the Stay in the Course podcast.
Appreciate it, bro. Thank you for the opportunity, man, the platform.
I'm Jimmy Johnson, and you've been listening to the Staying the Course podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you haven't yet, go to Apple, Google, and Spotify and subscribe, rate, and review the show today. And remember, you're called to stay the course.